Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman from the Greensboro, North Carolina Fire Department History Book Committee. We're here today at the Greensboro Historical Museum. I'm standing in front of the General Green, the first steam pumper, or as they called it back then, the steamer. Today, December 9th, 2019, we are starting a new tradition of recording and preserving the heritage and culture of our retirees. Our retirees have contributed so much to the success of our great fire department. Their stories retire with them and are sometimes gone forever when they pass away. They will share their emergency calls that will always be a part of their memories forever. So sit back and listen as they carry us through their journey in the Greensboro Fire Department.
My name's Randall Scott Brande, and I am currently 54 years old, and I made 30 years of service. Basically, I'm from Brown Summit, North Carolina, and I started in 1987. I actually have one individual that I'm related to. I don't think that he played a part on mine, but I think that I did play a part on his, and that's Jeff Crispin, currently a captain with Greensboro. Okay. He came on 5 years after I did, and he was actually out of college and just kind of swamped in something he was doing, and I suggested that he try out because we had both at the same time joined the same volunteer department. And I told him, I said, if you want a good job, come on and work for the Greensboro Fire Department. Currently, before I joined the fire department, I had been in college. I actually graduated in 1984 from Northeast High School. And what I had thought I wanted to do was to go to North Carolina State, and I did. And I was studying to be a mechanical engineer. That's what I initially had tried to do. After serving a year there, it just wasn't for me. I kind of saw that it was going to be more of an office job kind of thing. That just wasn't me. I liked being out and actually doing hands-on stuff. I would have rather have done building stuff with my own hands than actually in an office putting numbers down. So I actually transferred to UNC Charlotte in the hopes of playing baseball and obtaining a degree down there. And I actually went there in the fall of '85. Tried out for the baseball team. I was only one of two people who made it as a walk-on. But after the fall season, the coach went through his normal cuts, and I happened to be one that got cut. And I thought to myself, well, business administration is not for me. So I went to Appalachian State for 6 months trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. And I was doing physical education because I love sports. And after that year, I just knew that there's got to be something better out there for me. So that's where I stood right before I actually put in to apply for the job here. The process that we went through
to get the job
in 1987 was completely different than it is now. I know I can remember walking out there on the drill ground at the training center, and we did some physical agility stuff like pull-ups and push-ups and making sure that you could run certain distance and making sure that you could move okay. But we also did certain things like picking up hoses and putting them in the back of a pickup truck. But it wasn't just any hose. It had to be every other hose or things like that to not only see your physical stuff but also your mental capacity. And I can remember taking some of the mental capacity tests that we did, and they involve putting washers on pegs and things like that. And to compare to what goes on today, it was pretty basic things that we did back then, but you still had to make sure you did what you were told and in a certain way. When I was growing up, 1972, I can remember it well. My dad was one of the original guys who started the Northeast Guilford Volunteer Fire Department out in the community of Brown Summit. I was 6 years old at the time, and one of the things that I can constantly remember was being around the trucks, just like any kid, wanting to see the lights, wanting to hear the siren, wanting my dad just to put me in the cab, just to pull the truck out of the station, out onto the tarmac. Things like that. And I can remember being at my house and hearing his pager go off. and knowing that the trucks were coming my way, where we lived, which was close to 150 out that way. And I would make sure I got on my bike and rode as fast as I could to get to the intersection so that I could see the truck when it appeared coming out underneath Highway 29 and going by. At that point in time, I had always wanted to be a fireman, but I had never wanted to or knew much about Greensboro Fire Department. And in my way and in my life, it was about, when I make 18, I'm going to join Northeast Fire Department to be along with my dad and my brother. What got me into thinking more of Greensboro was my brother actually came through a class in 1985, and that's how I started learning more about what Greensboro had to offer. So I had the thoughts about being one, but they didn't quite come about until he started going through his process. My starting salary, oh Lord, I can remember it like it was yesterday. I've got my check somewhere in my filing cabinet, but we started off at $14,800 for a year. And like most people I've seen doing these things, and in my life, I thought I had hit the jackpot because I wasn't but 21 years old when I started. And $14,887 was a pretty good amount of money for a single guy. Our training class consisted of 20 people from Greensboro Fire Department. We also had 3 guys that had been sent over to us from Reedsville Fire Department who went through the training with us. The class started off with 20. We lost 1 guy, and it was of his own choice. He didn't fail out or anything like that. He was an older guy in his 40s. He was actually one of the most physically fit 40-year-olds I've ever seen. And he honestly just chose to take a route because of his age to get a better job with UPS. But out of the rest of us that made it through, we lost 1 guy from Reedsville, but 19 of us finished the class. The people in my class that I remember, I can remember all of them, but the guys that are, name a few of them, would be Steve Fuller and Rich Simmons, Tim Midkiff, and the one guy from Reedsville I'll never forget because he's such a big name, and that is Clyde Guy. And a lot of people don't know who he is per se, but he is in the National Hall of Fame for softball. He actually played with some of the biggest teams in softball. And in fact, one of his things he did for us when we had to do our entertainment on Entertainment Fridays was he took us out behind what used to be the way the training center and the garage looked. And he set us up out in the field at the smokehouse and at the tower. And he stood at the back of the garage and we shagged fly balls, and he hit the tower numerous times. And that is a long way to hit a softball. I think what I had down as a high moment in training was we were all pretty much about equal when we came in. There were a handful of us that had a little bit of volunteer background at the time. I didn't have much, just a few months. But being chosen as one of the 3 people, we were getting ready to do live burns and stuff. And Captain Brooks at the time chose me and 2 other guys to take us out to what used to be Carolina Circle Mall and took one of the old LaFrance trucks with us. And we learned how to drive it, how to pump it, because we were going to be the 3 people who were going to be put in charge of actually doing the pumping on those training fires. And I had always driven a stick shift, but I'd never had to double clutch anything in my life. And learning to double clutch that truck was something to remember. I'll tell this story. It's a funny story from our training. I'll hold off on naming a name, but we had one individual who, during the time we were doing blacked out mask, search and rescue, he went in. We had a few people go in and do our search, starting at the bottom, working our way to the top and out the door. But this individual happened to go in at probably about 10:30 that morning. And the cardinal sin that we had been told was do not change direction and turn and go with an opposite hand. And unfortunately, he chose to do so. Well, at 12 o'clock, he was still in the smoke lab. So he was pulled out after numerous times of passing the same door on Church Street with the door being open and Chief Coble smiling at all of us. At 12 o'clock, he was pulled out so we could go to lunch. Well, we came back. He was put back in at the same spot he was in. And if anybody can remember the time frame of 1987, we were using Scott two-way air packs. So we had the old full-piece face mask with the hose that dangled down that went into the box on the front. And when you got down to where your alarm was going off, you had to take and disconnect it, and you tucked it in your coat to be able to get yourself out as an emergency procedure. And I know people nowadays would think that is just utterly ridiculous, but that's the way it was back then. So he had already met that point in his search that he had to disconnect, and he tucked it in and he kept going. He went in at 1, at 2:30 he came out. Somewhere along the line, his face piece hose had fallen out of his coat, and he had drug it on the pavement throughout the training smoke lab. When he finally came out, he got a rounding of applause from all the guys that were standing out watching for him. And I told myself, when he came out, I said, that guy right there, to go through what he had gone through, to get out, if I ever get a chance to fight fire with him, I'll always know he's got my back, because he never gave up. And lucky enough, later on, I was able to work with him at Station 5. He's a good friend of mine, and that's one of the funniest stories I can tell you. To answer your question about doing something special, when I joined, I was probably a rare case in this scenario. I got 2 letters the same week. I got a letter from the Greensboro Fire Department stating that I'd been hired. And I got a letter from Guilford County Communications stating that I'd been hired as a telecommunicator. So I went for about a month juggling, trying to decide what's going to be best for me. I sat down, I prayed about it. I talked it then with my wife, who was my girlfriend at that time. What's going to make me happy? And I decided to take on the firefighter job. And mainly because of watching my dad and just wanting to be like that. When I first started, I wasn't sure. But after about 2 weeks of training, I knew I'd made the right choice. I've never wanted to have anything else besides it since. My first assignment, Engine 5, C shift, I was on the truck with the late Captain Wayne Brown. I had Hal Ritter as a driver. I had Edie Bailey, and I had Bryant Staples. And we were an oddity in our class also where that was concerned. It was at a specific time where they were looking at doing some transfers in in about 5 or 6 months. Everybody in my class got a prime assignment. They sent 3 of us to 1, 3 to 4, 3 to 5, 3 to 7, 3 to 8, 3 to 9, and 1 to 10. And we were all assigned to a good riding company at that time. I was assigned over there, and the ladder truck had Captain Gary Church, had Frosty O'Neill, had Skip Nix, Chris Herbin, and Danny Lynch. And when I walked in, the good thing was Frosty was not there. And they told me that when I got there. When he came back, I learned what it was like to be a rookie. A nickname that I was given, and that God bless him, Steve Fuller, Rich Simmons, especially Rich. They nicknamed me Snooter, and I do not know why. Snooter was the nickname. Rich come up with that. He would have variations of it from time to time, but everybody that knows Rich Simmons knows he's the kind of guy that likes to just see how far he can take it. But Snooter was what I ended up with, and the guys that have been around me for that long, you'll sometimes often hear them call me that. As far as pranks go, there's 2 that I can remember. One of them I was on the receiving end, and one of them was a pretty good retaliation done by the guys that I was working with at 5. When I first came on, I was actually working for Jimmy Joyce. We couldn't trade with anybody but the other rookies. So I was talked into helping out Randy Gordon and David Spears. They wanted to get Jimmy Joyce with the old bomb from the top of Station 5, which was 10 gallons of water in buckets. I did my part, or so I thought I was doing my part to help out. Little did I know they were actually setting me up. So when I came out of the station to lure Jimmy out, I took the rain bath for him. But I think the funniest one that I can remember that we pulled back on somebody, we had a structure fire one night while we were over at Old Station 5, and Engine 1 got relocated over there, and it was right at supper time. We had the whole meal put on the table. We were sitting down to eat. When the bell went off, we came back finally, and Engine 1 was gone, and so was our supper. They ate it all. So we had to start from scratch and go back, but we never forgot about that. And it just so happens that it wasn't long after that, one had gone out on a call, and we actually relocated the ladder company to Engine 1. Well, it was payback time. So we walked around the entire station. We took dimes, and we took every shower head off, and we put dimes inside of them and resealed them back so they had no water for anything. Anything we could get a dime in, we fixed. Not only that, but we took every bit of cable vision that they had and took the in to the out and the out to the in on everything. So minus a couple of calls to city maintenance and probably cable vision at the time, we knew we had a good laugh to get them back on, because I'm sure they were scrambling that night.
That's a good one.
The union at the time that I started was not active in '87. However, I got transferred to Station 18 in, I believe it was February, at the end of February. And when I went out there, I actually was on a company with Wayne Michaels and Richard O'Brien. And they were in the process of trying to get it started back. So I actually was there and sat down and actually heard a lot of the stuff that was done to get it reactivated and back on its course that it's at it today. For the most part, firehouse living, most of the stations I was at, the guys ate together. However, there were a few along the way that did their own thing. I can remember working at Station 17, which is now 41, and they didn't eat together. And it really made it tough on everybody, because everybody had to go to the store and find something for themselves. And I've always enjoyed sitting down together. I've always enjoyed being in the same bedroom together. It's just a part of being a firefighter. It's a special kind of thing. When you're at home with your family, you're with your family. You can shut a door from time to time and get away. You can do that at the fire station. But for the most part, when you're sitting in your house, you are with your family. And that's the way I've always viewed it working here at the fire department in Greensboro. I always liked the stations where everybody sat down and ate and talked. And everybody went in the bedroom and watched TV. For the occasional snorer here and there, you just have to learn how to deal with them. And of course, you got to watch out for flying toilet paper. As far as cooking goes, when I went to Station 5 out of training, the only thing I knew how to cook was spaghetti. And the only reason I knew how to do that was my mom had showed me that before I got gone from the house on my first tour. I said, "Can you please show me just something that'll get me by the first day?" And she said, "Well, let me show you spaghetti, because it's the easiest thing in the world to cook." I got lucky, and I was around a lot of people that actually knew some things about cooking. Ray Cook was one of them at Station 5. Smiling Bob Smith, Smiling Bob, showed me how to make cat head biscuits. Showed me how to make hoe cake. Showed me how to make a lot of different things. But you got to remember, when he showed me those things, we were at Station 1 and we had multi-companies. I tried to go home and do some of those things. And making cat head biscuits for two people with the same recipe doesn't come out when you're trying to cut it down. Not unless you like to play hockey. You know, that name of cat head biscuit, I've never understood the name. I just know that it looks so good. It's so thick, and it's got such a brown top to it. And I just remember everybody knew those were cat heads, versus when you could get it out of the store and just open up a container and do it. They just never looked the same, and they sure did not taste the same. My favorite dish to cook, when I was doing it, I learned from Ray Cook. He called it Chicken Colorado. And that was, you took chicken breast, and you basically took bacon before you did anything, and you cooked it about halfway through. And you wrapped it around the chicken breast, and you held it in place with some toothpicks, and you went ahead and put what chicken grease that you had left, and you put over the top so it would just absorb into the chicken. Well, once you were done with the chicken, or getting close, you would put barbecue sauce on it. And Sweet Baby Ray's is the way I go. And I put it on there, and once that has reached the top, you cover it with cheese and melt the cheese down on the top. And it is one dish that I've never had complaints about, but the guys at 59, when I retired, they actually asked me for chicken salad recipe, because everybody has a different way of doing it, but the guys said all three of them wanted the same recipe so they'd have something to take with them. That made me feel good.
Yeah.
Well, as far as dorm life goes, the assignments that I got to try out a little bit of everything. I've had the open bedroom assignment. When I was at 18, I had a house assignment to start off with until they built the station, so we all had individual rooms. I also had the ability to go, like I said, when I retired to Station 59, where everybody had their own individual room. There's a lot of different things that are good in each aspect, but from my point of view, I don't think you can do any better than having the common dorm room for all the guys. It just means that you're still a part of it, no matter for 24 hours a day. When you go home, there's a lot of things that get missed if you don't stay together. The stuff at night, especially the things that I saw at 59, you just lose being a part of the group when you go your own way and you shut a door. Firefighters in the downtime, I know I've been lucky. I've only been gone, it'll be 4 years this year, so I've seen a little bit of what goes on with some of it. You see a lot of people who are, in today's world, they're kind of to themselves. They may have something that they want to do, whereas we used to enjoy playing cards. I couldn't tell you the games of Shanghai that we played over Station 5, the cards that have been thrown around the station, the tables that have been turned upside down because of some of the games and by some of the people, but it was all in good fun. And it's like I said, with some of the things that they do in their downtime, even though some people may go their own way, when that pager hits, when the beeper goes off, everybody's back together again. As far as firefighters doing things with other families, I've seen it change. I have. I know when we first started off, I had about 2 or 3 different individuals that I felt comfortable around. But I think in the world itself that we live in right now, it's become so me in this world that we kind of lose touch with being happy being around some other people. That doesn't mean that you have to be with them all the time, but it would be nice. But if I had to count on my hands how many groups or people that I am truly around that I worked with, I could count them on one hand today because of the way things have changed. I know on my days off, if things needed to be done, I had a certain group of people I could call, and I've used them. And for instance, I went to David Brame's house, and we laid rebar all through there to pour foundation for his new house. I've had people come over. One of my best friends is Forrest Goff, captain. He's retired also, and when I need things, I call him because I know pretty much I can depend on him. It's a brotherhood. It is. You may not agree with everybody's strategies. You may not agree with everything they believe in sometimes, but for the most part, the majority of the people, if you picked up the phone and called them, they'd come help you. When retirees come to the fire station, that's always been a good one. I know an instance that I had not long ago, when Chief Manus came by the fire station over Station 2 one time. And it just so happens that he came on, it wasn't my shift, I was working for another guy, and nobody knew him. And I'd made it a personal thing to myself to make sure that everybody got up and spoke to him. And I made sure I introduced him as who he was, which was Chief J.W. Manus, former battalion chief here, one of the best guys you could have worked for. And I think we do kind of lack a little bit of that these days. I know when I go back to the fire station a lot of time, right now, for the most part, I'm fresh on the retirement scene, so they still remember who I am. So when I walk in, most everybody knows me. But I do see a lot of people still doing it the old-fashioned way. They'll say, "This is former Captain Randy Brande, and he is here today, just wanted you to meet him," and they'll introduce me to who's sitting at the table. But as I said before, you know, with the me world that goes on out of here, sometimes if you walk into a station, a lot of times they don't even ask you, who are you? Do you know what you're going, who you were, or did you work here? Things like that. And I think that's a lost thing that's happening. And it's not becoming of people that have actually worked here and gave their life for at least 30 years. A suggestion that I would probably have to improve it would do more of what we do. I know at the retirement breakfasts, they invite certain companies over to see the retirees. But I think you probably need to do something a little bit bigger than that. Somewhere that you can have retirees and own active duty people come together in a certain place and actually have people introduce who these people are. Some of the people with the stories that they have of the places that other people are working at today, you're missing out on a lot of this, what we're doing here, this history, by not talking to those individuals. I remember both of them well. In fact, the other day while I was at Station 5, my first call and my first fire, I wanted to make sure that I took a picture of them on my phone, because I had a sheet that I've got everything wrote down on for the first year that I was there, but I couldn't quite get my hands on it. But my first fire call was actually to 801 Green Valley Road, and it was nothing more than a fire alarm. But I can honestly tell you this, when we pulled out of the station that very first time, and the siren was going, and the trucks were howling, that's when I knew I had made the right decision. The first fire I had, same shift. If I had taken the bet, which most training classes take, we were going to do it in our class, the old bet of who gets the first fire. We just didn't get around to it, but I had the first fire on my third call. And it was in the 2200 block of West Friendly, and a lightning strike had hit a house, and we ended up having one room and contents fire. And I wish we'd have took that bet, because I would have won. As far as medical calls are concerned, I was never formally assigned to the squad, but I served enough time at Station 5 when it had the squad and the ladder truck as a combination. When we were over there for high level, I rode it on many, many occasions. When I first came on, though, the squads were basically what was riding medical calls in '87. The pumpers hadn't really been put into action as far as actually being dispatched on those med calls. They could be asked for, and a lot of times they were done when calls were way out of the territory, like toward the airport in our day, because that's where everything had been extended. And the first medical call I had was the morning I got off from my first shift. I'm a rarity, I tell you. And the guy, well, Jimmy Joyce was coming in to relieve me. He was the rookie on A shift, and he hadn't quite gotten there, and the engine got a call to go along with the squad to a CPR, because our squad was out, Squad 1, and they were sending Squad 3. So when I got there, I was actually with A shift, with Jerry Schamberg, Billy Combs, and Debbie Butler, and it was the first CPR that I had ever rode at the time. We worked hard, especially in dress uniform, because that's the way we were back then. You didn't leave that fire station without that dress uniform on. But we were all sweating in dress uniforms. Unfortunately, the person didn't make it, but that was the first med call and the very first CPR in the same go. As far as values of medical calls, I mean, it's what sustains us. That's the way I look at it now. That word fire on your hat, on your shirt, that means what you're a part of, but it doesn't mean what you do. And for those of us that have worked long enough to understand, we're not just about fire. We never have been. At one time, that's what it was. It was about fire. It was about, when the pager went off, it was a fire call. But people need help, and the way you can provide more to the people was to add, first they were adding medical calls, and then it was hazardous materials calls, and then it was specialty calls. And I think we've done a real good job of trying to meet the need of all those things involved, and it's kind of evident with some of the awards and things that Greensboro Fire has gotten over the years. One medical call in general that I can remember to this day, I've been the kind of guy that I can deal with stress pretty good. It's never really bothered me, because I have a good family and a good Christian base that has always backed me up, and I've had good friends to talk to. But the one call that always has been locked in my mind that I can never get out was I was on driving engine 1, and we went to Campbell Street, on a snowy morning and cold to beat the band. And I'll never forget the woman's scream when we got met at the door and she was being told that the baby was not going to make it. He was 3 weeks old, SID death. And just to hear that sound is something that's locked right in there. Some of the major fires I've rode on, I've been on a few. I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time at Station 4. I've spent 8 years at Station 4 where I picked up the majority of them. One of them was the one we were talking about earlier before we started this thing on Tipton Place. We burnt the lumber place up, storage. I was on George C. Brown when we burned it down for the last time. I was driving Engine 4 that day. I had been on several 2-alarm fires, but the one that stands out more than anything was I was a captain down at Station 4, and we got dispatched in the middle of the night to 324 South Elm. And I can remember this one very well because I was first in. When we rolled around the corner on Garl Street on the MLK, I could see it coming through the roof. It was so evident, and at that specific time, I immediately called for a second alarm. When we got down on Elm Street, Engine 11 had come up with us. We were breaking in the front door because we were trying to go from the front to the rear, just like we'd been taught. We got in. We had heavy smoke conditions. We were all together. There was 8 of us, luckily enough. And we were having to lay a 2.5 in because we knew we were going to need a lot of water. We got it all laid out, found the stairwell, went upstairs to where we thought the fire was, and we ran into a dead wall. We couldn't get through. There was no way to go anywhere. All we kept doing was stumbling over bar stools, chairs, and things like that. Lucky enough, we had other companies at the rear coming in, but we had to take that whole 2.5 charge and move it backwards, all the way back down the stairwell, find the secondary stairwell to get it back up. When we got it back up there, we were pretty much, flames were coming over the top of us. Engine 1 had met us in the back. They were fighting fire with what they had with Engine 3/4. We were trying to get a 2.5. And we ended up going back outside to set the deluge gun up. And Rescue 5 was still up in the top. And it was moving their way pretty quick. And I can remember Ladder 5 had just gotten set up over the top of us. They actually had the boom over the top of Engine 4 up to the window. When basically all hell broke loose, as to say. And Rescue 5 come diving out of the top windows into the bucket. And we were standing underneath them operating the deluge gun off the truck. And I can remember them just saying, "Get us out of here," as they were coming down. And luckily enough, we didn't lose anybody. And the guys did a heck of a job, and we stopped it at 324. We never let it go anywhere further. But I can remember that was probably my biggest fire because I was in charge of it. They used to laugh at me though. One of the things they always wanted me to do was ride as the acting chief at Station 1 when I was over at 4 in that battalion. And I'd ask them, "Why do you want me to come over here and ride as chief?" They said, "Well, every time you come over here, we get a working fire." And it's usually a 2-alarm fire. So whenever I'll come in the back door to ride acting chief that day, they were getting geared up for a day. 9/11 was a day that'll always be remembered. It's not a day that I'll ever forget. And the reason I say that is I come from a different angle. I made captain in July 1st, 2001. And I had been taken and put back at Station 5, which is, I had worked there for a while on high-level rescue. But they had gone into doing confined space rescue. And that really wasn't my thing, and that's why I asked for a transfer the first time. And I had just gotten back over there. But when I went home, I went to my secondary job, and I can remember hearing all the things on the radio that morning. And I immediately, once they talked about the second tower being hit and the things that were going on with it, I immediately started getting phone calls from battalion chiefs, from Captain Lynch, who was there, Danny Lynch, who was there, saying, "Are you able to go to New York?" And of course my immediate answer was yes. Now, I look back at that and I've always thought confined space has never been my thing. And I'm glad we never went from the perspective of that. But from a professional, from a brotherhood point of view, I wasn't going to let that stop me from helping anybody. If I go from the fire department as far as a mentor, I'd probably say one of the best people I ever worked for. And we didn't always see eye to eye, but Captain Gary Church. Gary was one of those guys that just, he kept you not in line like some people would do. Gary would keep you in spiritual line. He would ask you questions off the cuff, and I can always remember him asking certain people. He would always use the analogy, you're on a baseball field. And he said, you're on first base. If you're on first base, that means you know about the Lord. If you're on second base, this means you're here. Have you gotten to home yet? And that was always his question to everybody. And I always wondered why. You know, I came from a background that was Christ-centered, that was church-oriented. So, I mean, I knew these things already, but I always wondered why he was doing it. And one of the reasons he would do it, and he would do it so subtly, was because he knew the big game that we were in. And the big game is you could get taken out of the game at a moment's notice. And he wanted to make sure that everybody was right, just in case it was your bad day at work. And I've always thought highly of him because of that. But I had one of my biggest arguments with him. And he always told me he could argue, that I would argue with a signpost. And I actually told him the same thing, not trying to be rude to him, but we had a debate on something in one of the red books. And when he finally got the ability to go read it, he came back to me the next day and apologized for it. But I can honestly say, the best guy I've ever worked with. One of the biggest challenges I had in my service, and I caught wind of this from somebody else, I had always wanted to be a captain. That's one of the things I want to be. I always wanted to be a driver, and I still say driver is the best position in the fire department. I've loved driving, but I always wanted to be at least a captain. And I had struggled going back and forth. I had passed every test that I had taken, and I caught wind one day, and somebody said something to the effect of, you know, sometimes you just say too much. And it wasn't meant to be in a obscene way to me. It was just kind of a little bit of a tap on the head to say, you know, you might disagree with something, but you may be saying it to the wrong person. And when I heard that, and when I heard who said it, and I will throw this out there, when Jesse Walker said that to somebody else, and it made my way back to me, I had enough respect for Jesse Walker and where he stood. I said, you know, he's telling me something. It made its way back over here, and it made it in a good way. I might need to just watch what I'm doing. And it wasn't long after that I did get promoted. So I kind of threw a little bit of nod toward Jesse for at least making a comment that helped me out.
Okay.
Would I do this again? If I was that age when I came on, I'd do it all over again. This is a special job, and it is made for young people. It's a tough job for old people to come into. And when I say old people, I'm not talking about 50, 60-year-olds. It's a tough job for a 35 and 40-year-old person to try to change an opportunity and come do this job. But if you're looking for something that's wholeheartedly the best thing in the world as far as a job, where you can go have fun, you can go be around people that you just enjoy being around. You can't do that in a lot of places. But I can honestly say in 30 years of being here, I've had my ins and outs with a few people. We all have. But in the long run of it all, wouldn't trade a thing. I learned a lot from those ins and outs, but I also learned a lot from the happy days that I spent here. Hardest day was saying goodbye. That would go back to that heartbreaking moment, would go back to knowing, other than the medical call that I described earlier, one of the most heartbreaking moments that I ever had was knowing that I wanted to be that driver, to move up to being a driver. And when the list came out, I looked at it and I missed it by one question. I missed it by one, which gave me that desire. I had to wait 2 years, and what it did by missing it by one, I saw people who were in classes behind me move forward. And I thought to myself, I wasn't mad at them, I was mad at me. And I didn't want to fall behind. And it just made me study a little bit better the next time. You know, that's the one thing, the proudest moment. One of the things I've always told, and I always told my guys, and before I say this about being proud, I've always told my guys, always keep your integrity. I said, that's one thing about you. And I said, don't go around being a guy who boasts about yourself. I said, there's a lot of things in life people can take away from you, but they can't take your integrity away from you, but you can sure give it away. So before I say this, I just want you to know that's the way I feel. But as far as being the proudest, was the day that I went upstairs to get the gold badge. Because I knew hey, if I don't go any higher in this department, I've at least got to where I wanted to be. As far as dealing with death in general, it's like I said originally, my faith is what kept me involved in it more than anything. Being able to look at somebody going through pain and suffering, but to know that you're there to help. And if it happens to somebody and you've done your job, it wasn't in your control to start with. That's the thing that's always, helped me through it. But I have seen somebody, I had a guy on one of my companies that saw a death happening because it was the age of their child at the time. They literally had to go home. It was bothering them that bad. But I knew what they were going through. I understood. A lot of people don't know about me, but in my life, I've actually lost a child. I lost one at 5 months, but I made it through it. But it gave me the ability to talk to other people about the loss, and we worked through it all. Yes, it was. As far as dealing with the death of those people, one of the things was Jackie Beard. I worked with Jackie at Station 4. He was a driver on one shift at one time. I was a driver on the other. Then he made captain and came back, so I worked with him in that capacity some too when we switched shifts. That was a hard blow to lose somebody you knew that good. But as again I say, the people around you, the way everybody came together for that was awesome in itself. The ability to give to Jackie's wife what she needed, to let everybody know that the department was behind her. The first death that I can remember is your brother, was Raymond Cotton. And the reason I know that one is because we were in training at the time. And we were pulled out of training and told to go to work at the stations to be able to let the guys on the line, the guys and the girls, go to the funeral. And in one sense, we were getting that chance to go be a firefighter, but that wasn't the circumstance we wanted to go out there and do that for. But it gave us it gave us a good feeling inside to know that we were at least helping out the people that were already there in front of us. Working with female firefighters, I never had any problem. I came along in that year, Greensboro already had them. So it was just a matter of getting to know people. I couldn't have been put with a better person than Edie Bailey. Edie is that person that's going to make you communicate with her, make you like her. And I say that with all respect. She doesn't really have to make you. She's just that kind of individual. She is the person that you like. And I've always been a person that I've been a believer in. It doesn't matter who you are. But if you can't do the job, you don't need to do the job. If you can do the job, it doesn't matter who you are. It was all about, to me, about if you can handle what it's going to take to get me out, if you can handle what it's going to take to be a firefighter. And I say that of everyone. It's not just a female thing. Well, like I said, as far as change goes, when I first came on, it was basically the change from going from fire and medical. That's basically all we did. There was hazmat over Station 8, but it really was kind of the old homemade hazmat. We still had homemade tools and homemade everything, but we started doing a little bit of everything in the 30 years I went through. I mean, we started, I can remember when we started doing the high angle rescue. That was '89. And then it was trench rescue. And then it was structural collapse, and then it was this, and then it was that, and water rescue. And we have become so versatile that people expect us to do anything. But of course, when we first started, people kind of expected that too, because we were always, as I always put it, the baker, the candlestick maker, the electrician, the water guy. We were, if anybody needed anything and couldn't get somebody, a fireman would take care of it. A successful firefighter is one that can come in, first of all, with the knowledge that it's not a game. I think that's one of the things we're getting to in this society in today's time, that we have a lot of people who just view it as it's just another job. It's not. It's not an office job. It's not a job where you come in and you can crunch a few numbers, and if the guy next to you crunches a few more numbers, and you go home at 5 o'clock, you start the day off the same way the next day, and you may take a little bit more than he does the next day. This job is a real job. For those of people that want to hear this, this is life and death. And it's a hard job. It really is. But it's good people. The best firefighters are great people. And my thing to people out there would be is, if you want to be a firefighter, truly know what it's about. And truly know in your heart of hearts that you're ready to give up you and start concentrating on them. Because that's what it's all about. It's giving up yourself for somebody else. I'll take faith first in my life. To say that I was perfect in my life as a firefighter would be a lie. But I can honestly say, knowing who made me and knowing where I came from and knowing who loved me, which was Jesus, my faith gave me the ability to cope with the things that went on around me. It also gave me the ability to know that if anything happened to me, I was already taken care of. As far as the family is concerned, when I first started out, I was single. I was 21, and I got married in the process, and the guys at 5, they took my wife in just like everybody else. She was a part of the fire department. When we married, she came right in, When the kids come along, they were a staple at the fire station. They came by. People knew them by name. You tried to make sure you knew everybody's kids by name. Wasn't always the case, but even if you didn't, people surrounded the kids, and the kids enjoyed being around all the people. But as far as my family in general, that just gave me the thing. That's why I brought my helmet in today. And a lot of people don't do this, but one of the things that I had always done when I was on Engine 4, and especially when I was a captain, I always took my family with me. And if you look on the inside, and I can't see, don't know if you can see the picture. That's it. I don't know if you can see it. There is a picture inside of it, right in here, and it's of my family. And I saw this somewhere, and I can't remember where, but any fire, any place, anywhere, I always took my family with me wherever I went. And it was so that I knew that if I ever got in a bad situation, I had the warmth with me. So that's something special that I always did. Off the job, right off the bat, I always go to my wife. She's always been my outlet for everything. Not to say that she wanted to hear everything that I had to say when I came home, especially when I had bad days. And I mean, when my bad days were still good days. But if something disturbed me, or something went on, or something happened that I just didn't quite agree with, she was always that outlet for me. But I guess the one guy that I've got growing, we started off when we moved. When I was at 5 in '89, I didn't even know this guy. But when Forrest Goff came in '89 in his class, he got assigned to Station 5. And he and I kind of made a little bit of a bond. And don't know what he was even about. But he moved, and he actually married a girl that went to high school with me. So he's out in my area community right now. And for going on a good 20 years or so, he's always been my outlet when we needed to talk about things, especially going on here. Things that you might not be able to talk to somebody else about. maybe some things in your life that you didn't want to talk to anybody else about. He's always been my outlet, and he's always tried to give me some advice, and I've always tried to return the favor to him. My health in general has been great. The only things that I can ever tell you that have started to show up for firefighting probably, as far as I'm concerned, has been knee trouble a little bit. And I've got a little bit of neck problems and I kind of think that that's probably from toting around that air pack on my back for so long. But as far as the rest of it's concerned, I've been a lucky guy. I made 30 years, and the worst possible thing that ever happened to me was I got 2 dime size burns on my knee from kneeling on a door tread. And the things that happened in and around me, because I could have very well been close to something else, because one day I fell into a swimming pool with all my gear on an air pack, and it really wasn't a swimming pool, it was more like a cesspool. If I was talking to an upcoming firefighter, I would say, look, you can put your heart and soul into what you want to do, but it needs to be the third thing on your list. You need to put God up on the top, because he's going to get you through it. You need to put your family in there second, and don't ever sacrifice number 2 for number 3. Because when you start sacrificing that, you're going to lose number 2. And number 2 should mean more to you than anything else. But once you've taken care of 1 and 2, give your heart and soul to what you can do on your job, and try to be the best person that you can possibly be. And as I said earlier, you have integrity. Take it with you. Don't let no one take it away. Don't sell it for anything. If it means you don't get a promotion, if it means you don't move up as high as you think you ought to, don't sacrifice your integrity for anything. If I had one thing to remember about Greensboro Fire Department,
What would you want them to remember?
if they were trying to remember something about me, this would be what I'd want them to know, and I hope this is what they already know, is that I try to treat everybody fairly. I try to, if you came to me with a problem about this, I would try to help you. If you came to me about this, I'd try to do it for you. I would try to do anything I could for you. Now, I had an old saying when I was a captain. I said, guys, I'm here for you. I'll do anything I can for you. But if you ever take advantage of me one time, that's the last time I'll stand up for you. And the reason I said that to them was because I wanted them to truly understand that if I gave them something, it was worth something of value. And, you know, the guys I run into now, they're out and about when I walk by them. I hope I've done a pretty good job, because when they meet me, they don't call me Randy. They call me Captain. I would like my family to remember that. Goes back to what he said earlier, that I know my son, when I told him I was doing this interview, he said, well, you know, that's about time. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you got a lot to say. And I didn't know how to take him. And but he meant it in a good way, that you got a lot of stuff that you want people to hear. And I said, well, I hope so. I hope it's good stuff. But as far as my family is concerned, I hope they'll always remember that they always stayed number 2. That number 3 never pushed in front of number 2. I think the value of what you're doing, I think it's got a real high value content in it. And what I mean by that is because it's like you and I have talked, and I've been lucky enough to be able to send some of these paper clippings, pictures, and things that I have.
And keep on.
There's a history that's got lost. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. There's people that have got lost. It's not just about a history, it's about people. There's a lot of people out here that have, I can only remember so far back, whereas yourself, you may know a little bit further back than I do. You know people, and I hear names and I see names. And it's nice to know that when you put a picture of something or someone or something that you can actually put a name with it. It's hard when you look at something and you see your face in it and people start naming names and they get to you sometimes and they don't know who you are when you listen to people. And I think that's probably the best value everybody wants in life, is just to be known as being somebody. You don't have to be the greatest person in the world, but if you're known, it means more than anything. To be honest with you, in 30 years, it's like I've always said, it's a great place to work. It really is. Met a lot of friends. I may not see everybody, may not be able to do stuff with everybody, but it's like, for instance, you and I, we didn't work together. You were on a different shift when you were at Battalion 1, when I was at 5. We worked on a trade here and there, but I didn't work for you. But it's like I've always said, when we pass each other, you speak to me. And that's the one thing that I've always told people. The difference between, and I laugh, my wife tells me this all the time because I laugh because she asked me this question. She says, why is it women argue with one another all the time and men nod at each other? I said, well, there's something about men. I said, men usually duke it out and then they go have a beer or something to that effect. And I said, but here's the thing. I said, I've always prided myself in being able to walk by somebody, and even if I don't know you, at least acknowledge that you exist. And that's what this stuff is about. Acknowledging people exist, that they actually were a part of something bigger than themselves.
We hope you enjoyed watching these documentaries. It was our goal to share and preserve the memories of our retired Greensboro firefighters. It is our desire that these documentaries will inspire future generations to continue the brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie while always striving for excellence in their careers. While fire apparatus, equipment, and technology have improved, several things will always remain the same. The courage and bravery it takes to mitigate natural and man-made disasters will always be a part of the job. Although our retirees are no longer a physical part of the GFD world, a giant piece of each retiree's memories have been shared with you today. These memories will be in their hearts and minds forever. A special thank you goes out to Captain Harold Haney for his many long hours of recording and editing. Thank you, Harold. A job well done.